Welcome to the last coastal coral of the year. It's been a wild ride this year for everyone, and we were kind of going to go out with a bang, and we are going to after we get through these technical issues. So we're going to start off with an acknowledgement of country. So we want to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Kabi Kabi and Gubbi Gubbi people. We acknowledge and pay respects to all elders past, present and emerging, and we acknowledge and respect the continued connection to land and sea country. I'm going to touch on it a little bit later down the track, but this week is also NAIDOC week, so I think it's really important for everyone to, if you don't know what country you're on, to figure it out. I've got a link further down, which is a map of all the Indigenous lands in Australia. I think it's a really important thing to know what Indigenous country you're on and who you should be thanking for keeping the country in good condition for as long as they have. Oops. So firstly, Reef Check Australia, oops, what did I do? Oh goodness. Our mission is to promote healthy local coral reef ecosystems, and we do this by focusing on scientific research, community education, and marine conservation through grassroots environmental action. I am an ambassador with Reef Check Australia, so is Shai and Emily and Julie. She's a surveyor. So there's a few of us on the call who can help you with any questions. And Reef Check Australia is a not-for-profit organisation dedicated to providing ways for the community to better understand, appreciate and protect our oceans and marine environments. Shai, did we load? I'm not sure if we loaded the polls for this one. So I think we know generally where people are from. I think we have mostly people from the Sunshine Coast. If not, you can let us know in the chat. We had someone ask about this talk from Canada. So if they made it onto the call, well done. So yes, that's Reef Check. For a little housekeeping, like I said, you're all on muted and your videos are off. It just helps with the bandwidth to hopefully keep our internet stronger and so that Chris's presentation comes through clearly. If you want to be added to the mailing list, we send around updates and information and some exciting coral reef news every now and then. You can send your details to seqevents@reefcheckaustralia.org. If you've got any questions, you can add them to the Zoom chat box. And like I said, we'll be taking a group photo. I might do that just before I hand over to you, Chris, if that's okay. I'll wrap up my part and then we can take the photo and then it'll be all you. If you have missed any of our recent events, they are already on the YouTube channel, so you can head there and check them out. This one will be uploaded soon as well if you want to check that one out after it is finished. So just a few upcoming events. We've got beer yoga again. It's on Monday the 30th of November at Your Mate's Brewery in Warana. It's always a good time. We have good turnouts. If you want to head along, have some bevies while doing some stretches, this is where to go. Purchase online at Your Mates on Your Mates website. There's also yoga under the sea at Sea Life Mooloolaba on Friday the 11th of December. That's run by Chloe from Yoga for the Ocean. Oh, sorry, this is incorrect. There's no beers at this yoga. I'll update that. But yes, that's more of a calm flow vinyasa yoga. I don't think you'll be having beers there, sorry. There's also this Eco Expo Festival Christmas Market. This is a yearly event, not the Christmas market, but the Eco Expo Festival is a yearly event that's held in Brisbane to showcase sustainable businesses and innovations. But they're putting on a Christmas market this year selling sustainable eco products that I'm going to definitely go there and stock up for my friends and family. And so our next coastal coral is going to be in February of next year. It seems crazy to be talking about February already. But it's only a few months away. So keep an eye on our social media pages. And if you're subscribed to the mailing list, you'll get updates as they come. And there'll be other events over summer, which we obviously can't promote yet because they don't know when or what they're going to be. But keep an eye on our social media so you can stay up to date. Another quick shout out, it's the start of the turtle nesting season here on the Sunshine Coast. So if you come across any strandings or turtle tracks that might not have been identified yet, you can call the strandings hotline, or if you find turtle tracks, you can call, if you're north of Maroochydore, call Coolum Coast Care, and if you're south, call Turtle Care, Sunshine Coast. So NAIDOC Week, Sunshine Coast Council kicked off with a flag raising ceremony this morning, which was really nice. They had dancers from Cubby Cubby and Torres Strait Islander groups. And it's a really special time of the year for us to recognise and acknowledge and take the time out of our days and weeks to acknowledge the traditional owners. The Sunshine Coast Council has a lot of resources. I know it's a long link, but you could just type Sunshine Coast Council NAIDOC Library and it comes up on Google. And there's this event on Friday afternoon and evening at the Nambour Showgrounds. If you want to head along, it's a free, family-friendly event. We just wanted to do a shout out to Sunshine Coast Council Blue Heart Project, who won a national award this week. It was the Cities Power Partnership Regional Innovation Award. And they were recognised for they've got a joint project with Unity Water and the Queensland Government where they're converting 5,000 hectares of former sugarcane land into a wetland. So that's going to restore carbon dioxide in the soil, enhance the river water quality, and provide recreational opportunities for locals and tourists, and obviously expand biodiversity values in the area. So that's really exciting. If you haven't been out there yet, it's just off River Road on Yandina Coolum Road. It's a nice little walk and you can see these wetlands. It's really nice. Another shout out on the Sunshine Coast Council put out their coastal hazard adaptation strategy this week for public comment. That's an opportunity for us to let the Sunshine Coast Council know what we value and whether or not their coastal hazard adaptation strategy is reflecting that, and if we think that they're doing enough or what they could do. So please they've got a survey open, so you can have a flick through the draft, and there's different documents that you can look at, and if you could make a comment on that, I think it's really valuable for us all to have a say in what our council decides on behalf of all of us. If they're not getting the feedback, then I'm not sure if they'll be representing the community. And this one, the Friends of Bedina have been continuously fundraising to defend a high-rise from being built on near Bedina Beach. It's adjacent to a turtle nesting beach, which it's got development approval, but they're challenging it in the Planning and Environment Court at the moment. And up until tonight, there's a dollar for dollar donation matching. So if you did want to donate anything, tonight's the night because it's being matched dollar for dollar. So that's a really good opportunity to make your dollar count more than usual. We also have Ocean Art. Naomi developed these greeting cards for Christmas. 50% of the proceeds go to Reef Check Australia. They're really beautiful cards. If you did want to buy any for friends or family, you can jump onto her website and check them out. Her work is really beautiful. I was looking at it today. She's got lots of beautiful prints. And these other local businesses support Reef Check through donating some of their proceeds. So if you see them around or if you see them on Instagram or anywhere, try to support them because they support us, and they're really nice local businesses who are doing some good for the planet and good for us and good for them. We love supporting locals. And again, thank you to all of our sponsors who help make these events happen. So Sunshine Coast Council, Port of Brisbane, City of Gold Coast, City of Townsville, Clean Water Group and Great Barrier Reef Foundation. They all support us so that we can continue doing what we do, doing the reef surveys that are a vital part of what Reef Check's purpose is. And thank you to the local businesses and companies who donate some little goodies. Surprise, Chris, you're going to be getting a little goodie bag full of some little eco-conscious gifts. So we'll grab your address off you later and we'll post that out to you. So yeah, it's a nice way. We're really grateful for these businesses donating some of their products so that we can then thank our speakers who take the time out of their day or night to share their good news with us. And thank you to everyone behind the scenes who makes this happen. We had a bit of a frantic start to the night, but hopefully we've sorted it out and everyone is going okay. We do really miss having these events in person. It was always a great time to catch up with people and mingle and meet new people. So we'll see what happens by the start of next year. We might be back at Sea Life, we might still be online, we might do both, we don't know yet. But yeah, I'm gonna, I'll introduce you, Chris, and then when we do the changeover, I'll get everyone to turn their videos on. So tonight we're gonna be hearing from Dr. Chris Rohner. He's a principal scientist of the Global Whale Shark Program at the Marine Megafauna Foundation, which is a not-for-profit research and conservation organisation. Chris has been researching whale sharks and other large marine animals for over a decade and holds a PhD from the University of Queensland. His research is collaborative and interdisciplinary and aims to aid the conservation of threatened marine species. Tonight, Chris will be talking about what we now know about the world's largest fish and how citizen scientists can contribute to the study of whale sharks.
Thanks for the introduction, Renee, and thank you to Reef Check Australia team for having me. It's a pleasure to present to you guys some of the work that I've been involved with whale sharks. And I hope you guys all enjoy it. It's a fairly informal talk, not super sciencey. There might be a few graphs, but mostly lots of pretty pictures. That should keep everybody entertained. And as Renee said, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. Or if you need clarification straight away, also just sing out and we can discuss. So today I'll tell you quickly a little bit about myself, my career, and then focus on the population structure of whale sharks, mainly because it's the part where citizen science really comes into play, and you guys are all into citizen science. You probably are. A lot of you guys are volunteering for Reef Check Australia or for other organizations. So that's why I put the focus on that for this time. Normally, I guess my talks are a little bit more scientific, maybe a bit more mathematical. Sometimes I do a lot of analysis. I thought I'd try to switch it around a little bit. And at the end, we'll have a look at some of the conservation issues as well that whale sharks face and what are some of the things we can do about it. All right, so let's start. Click. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm not from Australia. I was born in Switzerland and lived there for the first part of my life. It's not particularly a nation that is famous for its ocean explorers. Most of the water comes in frozen form there. But I was lucky enough to have adventurous parents, and as a family, we all started to dive in the Red Sea when I was a teenager. And I decided there and then that I was going to become a marine biologist. It was always my dream to work in places where other people go on holidays. And it's worked out pretty well so far, as we'll see through the slideshow. I went to the University of Queensland for my undergrad in marine biology, which was really fun and interesting, lots of things to learn. And we also did cool trips up to Heron Island and up to Minjerribah or North Stradbroke Island. And, you know, during the course, I was fairly certain that I wanted to pursue a research career. And so I continued on with an honours project in Professor Tom Creep's lab that was on marine parasites. In my case, I looked at the parasites of goatfishes, you can see in the top right corner there. And the fieldwork took me to Lizard Island, which was a beautiful place to work in. I managed to find some new species of worms too, so it was in the end a bit of a taxonomy study. You can see the drawings of some of the new species in the list. And I named one of them after my high school biology teacher, who kind of helped me get on the road to becoming a biologist. So that was nice to say thanks in that way. And as I wanted to continue, I was looking for a PhD project. I was keen to continue doing field work and sort of a conservation orientated line of work as well. And I was keen to go to Africa. I don't actually quite remember why, but so for some reason it was so. And So I ended up studying whale sharks. It's not that I've always been a complete shark nerd. I'm mostly interested in the scientific process more than the animal itself. But obviously, once I landed with whale sharks, I was pretty happy. They're amazing animals to swim with and to study. And so I haven't looked back since. I was pretty lucky in a way. So my PhD was at the University of Queensland, also in collaboration with the CSIRO and with the Marine Megafauna Foundation, which is a small research NGO and non-profit as well, registered in the US and in the UK. And it is based out of Mozambique. You can see an aerial drone photo here that Simon took of our head office somewhere in the back there, a little hut. It's a really cool place to work. And during my PhD, I spent probably half the time over there in Mozambique and the other half back at uni crunching the numbers. And I must have done something right because the Marine Megafauna Foundation kept me on after I finished my thesis, and I've worked with them since as a scientist and now principal scientist. Reload. Sorry about that.
Nailed it. Good job.
There is a photo missing there, but anyway, the whale shark team at the Marine Megafauna Foundation currently has 4 scientists on the panel. Simon Pierce is missing on the top left, but I hope we'll see a photo of him later on. He's also the co-founder of the organization. And Claire Preble up in the top right, she has worked a lot on biochemistry and the feeding ecology of whale sharks. And Alex Watts at the bottom right is a PhD candidate at the Manchester Metropolitan University. And she works on whale shark genomics. So we all have kind of our different specialty subject. So researching whale sharks has one amazing advantage or benefit to it, and that's field work. It's really cool to be in the water with these huge fish. And working with them now for over a decade has taken me to some really sweet places. I've been involved in research projects all the way from the Galapagos to Tanzania and from Mexico to the Philippines. I was working with local teams wherever we go. And yeah, obviously that's great. You guys probably know most of you will be divers or snorkelers as well. It's cool to be underwater and interacting with the animals and collecting the data. But I also spend a lot of time on the computer. I do a lot of analysis and maths, and I write articles and grant applications. And at the moment, we're writing a textbook on whale sharks. Actually, I contribute a couple of chapters to that, and Simon is one of the 2 editors, and that will be coming out sometimes next year. So keep an eye out for that. It should be a good read for everybody. I don't just study whale sharks. I also have done projects on other animals. They're mostly large ones, like the manta rays in the top left and mobile rays in the top right. Some turtle work as well on the bottom left. And we had recently a big project on billfish out of East Africa. So I'm happy to apply my skills to wherever the project takes me, really. Yeah, usually I work as a strong conservation focus, so that keeps it interesting and useful. But of course, today's talk is about the whale sharks, so let's focus on that. And I start off with a question for you guys so I can have a quick drink and gather my voice. How large do you think is the largest whale shark that has ever been measured? How large is the world's largest fish? You can just type in your answer into the chat box, and then we'll hear from Emily maybe some of the numbers. And then we'll have a look at the results as well. While you're typing, I have a little video, hopefully it'll work, just to give you guys a quick minute.
Lots of answers coming through, Chris, but I don't know if I can take Jodie's answer. I feel like that's cheating.
Yeah, leave her out.
Yeah.
This video makes me reminisce fieldwork a bit. There's actually, I think maybe the last day or the second last day of fieldwork in Tanzania, pretty much a year ago, which was the last time I saw a whale shark, because this year things have been cancelled. So
yeah, crazy you saying that.
Yeah.
Thanks
but
to
that was a really nice morning. So it's good to relive that one. Okay, Emily, hit me with some numbers.
Okay, alrighty. We have Kelly saying 18 meters. Lauren's guess is 12. Marie's 100 foot. Gina's 18 meters. Alexandra 60 foot. Someone called Whale Shark, that's super eager, unless it is a whale shark joining our chat, says 20 meters. Joanna 14 meters. Amanda 15 meters. Logan, my son, who's 8, says 12 meters. Thanks, Logan's son. Kaylee says 26 meters. Lily 21. Jodie, I'm not reading yours out. Joanne says 15 meters. No one read Jodie's in the comment box. Renee's guess is 25 meters. Peter says 10 meters. And Shai says 8 meters. Phil says 20.5 meters.
Wow. Okay.
Did we get any on point, Chris? How are we looking?
We have a really nice spread, and I guess the answer is a bit longer than just the number. So yeah, I mean, there's some really good guesses. Those who were somewhere around the 18 to 20 meter mark were spot on. I guess that's around 60 feet. I'm not 100% sure with the conversion. So well done. We've got a well-educated group here.
Proud of our Reef Check crew there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the longest whale shark that has been, measured, there was actually in a fishery in Taiwan, but it was measured at about 20 meters. So it's not a particularly great measurement, but so about 20 meters is the longest one. And then the next one that has an accurate measure is 18.8 meters. I think that was caught in Taiwan, in India. That really long one from Taiwan weighed over 32 tons. Or even a bit more maybe. But there was another that we don't have a length measurement of that weighed 42 tons. So they truly get enormous. And that makes the whale shark by quite a long way the biggest fish in the world. And quite likely also the biggest fish that has ever lived, according to what we know from the fossil record so far. So whale sharks truly get gigantic. But as probably also most of you know, most of the sharks that we see, or most of the whale sharks that we see regularly are not quite that large, and we'll get into that in a few slides' time. This photo is of one of the bigger ones I've seen from the Galapagos, where we have sharks ranging to about 13 meters long, the ones I've seen anyway. There's probably longer ones out there as well. But yeah, really big fish and really cool to swim with. Now, whale sharks, even though they are so huge, there was not a lot known about them up until maybe a couple of decades ago. Even Jacques Cousteau here, with all his exploration, has only ever seen 2 in his life. And up until the mid-1980s, there were just over 300 records of whale sharks compiled in. So not there. That has changed recently, and mostly that's changed because of the discovery of whale shark aggregations, or constellations as we recently named them in a paper. Whale shark aggregations or constellations are places where lots of individual whale sharks come together, usually to feed, and it's usually a predictable and seasonal affair. So you know where to go and at what time, and then you will see the sharks there. This drone footage Simon took out in Qatar in the Arabian Gulf, where there were, hundreds of whale sharks feeding together. That's, oops, it comes again, sorry. That's probably unusual. Most of the aggregations don't have hundreds of whale sharks in one go. You might have 5, or you might have 10, or you might have 20 or so together. But the predictable nature of it means that we now had access to these whale sharks and we could study them. The first of these whale shark aggregations that was discovered was actually in Australia, and you guys probably all know where it is, over at Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia, where a medical doctor, Geoff Taylor, discovered that the sharks are there at a seasonal interval, and he started doing the first sort of field studies on the whale sharks. Since then, there's a few other places that have been discovered where whale sharks also aggregate, and those yellow dots on the map indicate some of those, and the orange outline roughly shows where whale sharks live, so in the tropics and subtropics. And you can see there's lots of areas now that we have found whale sharks aggregating. Here's another drone photo that Simon took from Mexico. And all the little brown dots are whale sharks, and all the white dots are boats. So whale shark aggregations mean two main things. The first one is that scientists now have access to whale sharks and can actually study them. An animal that is otherwise really oceanic and solitary most of the time. So if you wanted to find one out in the open ocean, it'd be really hard and it would take a long time. And then you'd have one, and as opposed to an aggregation where you have lots of them, and you can do some actual science there. So that's a bonus, of course, for scientists, a benefit. And it's also a benefit for tourists. Tourism operators quickly caught on that you can go out and see the sharks and then take tourists with you. Whale sharks are, big, charismatic, kind of on the list for many marine tourists, particularly to see and to swim with. The spot pattern on the side of the shark, or all over the body really, is unique to each individual, just like a fingerprint for humans. So when you take a photo of that spot pattern, you can compare it with the other spot patterns and figure out if that shark has been seen before or if it's a new one. And the standardized area that we use for this is on the flank, on the side of the shark, just behind the last gill slit. You can see that 4 of those gill slits in the photo. The 5th one is missing. Oh, the first one, I should say, is missing on the left-hand side. The 5th one is in the photo, and then also the pectoral fin at the bottom needs to be in there, or at least where it inserts into the body. This area is good because it's mostly 2-dimensional. It's not super bendy, so it makes it easier for a computer algorithm to extract the spots and match them. So, of course, you can imagine comparing loads of whale sharks by hand would take years. So thankfully, somebody clever came up with an algorithm that matches the sharks for us. That algorithm was actually developed by NASA to look at star constellations up in the night sky. And I guess whale shark spots kind of look like a night sky in a way. And so it compares all the different angles between the spots and figures out which one's the best match. And then the researcher just has to either agree or say, well, there was no match for that. The left and the right-hand side of the whale shark have different spots. And so as a standard, we use the left-hand side if you want to assign a new ID. But if you happen to be on the right-hand side, you can also take a photo from there. And if somebody else in the past had taken a photo of both sides, then you can match it by the right side. You just can't assign a new shark. So it's a fairly simple technique. And also nowadays, lots of people have cameras and go underwater. So we have more and more data coming in, which is really useful. And I'll show you what we do with this data now as well. So we use this online platform that's hosted on www.whaleshark.org, which is part of the Wild Book series. And this is where we upload all of our photo ID and they put that data with it. So for example, you need to know where you saw the shark and perhaps on which day or at what time. And the good thing with this platform is that everybody can contribute their photos. So if you go out and you see a shark, you can take a photo of its side, you can upload that and hit the report your sightings button, and it'll just walk you through it. And when you do that, you really help study whale sharks. It's really simple for you, but really interesting and useful for us. It's also a cool way to be involved in whale shark science in general, because you will get an email back once your shark has been matched, and it will tell you which shark you saw. And if that shark is seen again in the future, you will get an email again, and you kind of can track your shark or the one you've seen as you go through time. It's a pretty cool way to be involved. And there's a few extra data points you can enter if you are willing to make some observations. So for example, in this photo, I'm trying to measure the size of the shark or the length. I have stereo video setup. Good night, bye-bye. Sleep well. Sorry. Stereo video setup where two cameras are positioned at a slight angle, so there's an overlap in the middle, and from that overlap you can calculate the size of the shark to a better, a more accurate value than just estimating, which we also have done and still do sometimes, or most of the time actually. And you can do that too. If a swimmer is next to the shark, you can kind of guess with the fins. She or he is probably 2 meters long, and then you can extrapolate from there. And it's useful for us to know if the shark was, more like 10 meters or more like 3 meters long, even if it's not super accurate. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the sex of the shark. And we're pretty lucky in that sharks have external morphological differences by which we can differentiate the males from the females. Am I still there? Okay. Yeah, good. I just got the internet thing again. You have to dive under the shark a little bit and look underneath the pelvic fins, which are those fins where I'm kind of pointing my camera towards in the photo at the bottom. And when you do that, you can see clusters of males or the absence of clusters in females. So clusters are those sausage type looking things. If the clusters are small and thin, it's a juvenile, and if they're long and thick, it's an adult male. And if they're none there, it's a female. You have to be a little bit cautious when you check for the sex, because some of the sharks don't like things under their belly. So I kind of try to sneak under it without the shark noticing it. And that might take a little bit of practice. So if you try to do that yourself and you notice that the shark is a bit uncomfortable, just back off. It's not that important. It's more important that you leave the shark in peace. And so with all this data together, we can look at the population structure of the whale sharks at the different aggregation sites. And this slide reminds me to tell you and to tell myself as well that the results or the things I show you here is not just a one-man show. It's not, I don't do everything by myself at all. There's lots of people involved, and whale shark science, just like other science as well, is always collaborative. So it's good to acknowledge the other people that are involved in. Simon Pearce is really interested in population structure of whale sharks. So this is work I've done with him. So here we have some results now from an aggregation site in Tanzania. And on the vertical axis, the x-axis, you have total length of the shark, which ranges from 0 to 20 meters. As we know, whale sharks grow up to 20 meters long, and they are born at about ½ a meter long. And on the y-axis, the vertical, you've got the frequency. In blue, there's males, and in red, there are females. And at first glance, you can see that there's many more males than females. In fact, in Tanzania, it's about 85% of the sharks that we see are boys. And the second thing you can see immediately is that there's a lot of white area on the graph. So we only see a fraction of the total size range of the species, roughly between about 3 and maybe 8 or 9 meters long. And what that means in terms of the demography is that you have a large juveniles that are at this aggregation site, but we don't have the babies or the small juveniles, as I said, born at about ½ a meter long and up to 3 meters or so. We're missing them. And we also don't have the big whale sharks that are longer than 8 or 9 meters long. And 8 or 9 meters is also roughly the area where whale sharks become adults. So we don't have the adults, we don't have the babies, and we only have some females. So we're really only looking at a small proportion of a functional population in this particular aggregation site. When we compile all this data now from the whole world, thanks to the collaborative effort on whale.org, where everybody loads their photos, we can see that the population structure is actually very similar to what I just showed you from Tanzania in most of the other places as well. So we have sharks that are on average smaller than 8 meters, so not adults, in almost all of the places. And we only have large sharks in this picture is only on the Galapagos and in St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. There is another site in the Philippines, which is not in here. I'm actually not sure if the average size is more than 8 meters, but there are some big sharks in other places too, but it's not the norm. There's only these 2 places where you have usually large sharks. And the same is the case with the sex bias that we have seen in the Tanzania data. Almost everywhere, there's more males than females. There's an exception in the Red Sea where you have 50-50 male and females. And in the Galapagos, again, there you can see that single red dot that we have there, where we almost only see females and not males. So clearly these whale sharks segregate both by size and by sex. And they have these different ecologies, or the different lifestyles, as you wish, if you, in the different life stages that they go through. So we don't really know a lot about what the little sharks do, the small juveniles. We don't know a lot about what the large sharks are doing either, but we know quite a bit about the large juveniles. That's the group that we see in most of those aggregation sites. So let's have a quick look at one of the exceptions, which is at the Galapagos, as you might remember from the map. This is a photo from Darwin's Arch up in the north of the archipelago. And that is where we see the large adult female whale sharks. And as you can see in the photo, they look big. The belly seems to be bulging out a little bit. So when we first saw them, we thought, oh yeah, that must be the pregnant female whale sharks that we've been missing for all these years. And so we did a bit of a further investigation in that, again, with many other people involved, particularly Jonathan Green and Alex Hearn, which are the project leaders over there, both live in Ecuador, and also Rui and Kiyomi from Japan, who have developed some cool new methodologies to investigate whale shark reproduction. And if all goes to plan, I'll show you it all in a video, so I don't have to talk. And the text at the bottom should explain things. All right, so I hope you could follow that video fairly easily. There's one I shot a couple of years ago in the Galapagos. Unfortunately, again, I missed the field trip, which is an extra shame in the Galapagos because it's amazing to dive there with all the hammerhead sharks and everything around. But also this moment when we looked at the first ultrasound images back on the boat, and we came back from the dive, and we saw that there was no baby whale sharks, no egg capsules, nothing in there. We just we were all a little bit shocked. I guess it was one of those moments. We have to go back to the drawing board, and it's possible that the whale sharks there in the Galapagos are pregnant maybe at a different time of year. So next time we go out, we'll try to go a bit earlier in the season, and maybe we have more luck. But basically what we know so far is that we haven't found the pregnant females yet over there. And so that brings me to the next poll for a quick break for myself. How many pups do you think whale sharks can bear? And there's a photo here from the Philippines. Oh, maybe I have another video actually, I'm not sure, do I? No, I don't think so. Photo from the Philippines of one baby whale shark that was found some years ago. It was fished. Officers from WWF got hold of it and released it later on. But you can see they're fairly small when they're born. Do we have any questions, any answers coming into that?
We sure do. Kelly has 300. Renee says 3. Gina says 12. Simone says 6. We figured out Simone was whale shark, so no whale sharks attending. Terry says 10. I skipped Lily. She said 8. Joanna 1. Nick says 3, and Amanda says 4. Shy's copying what Jodie said, so no more cheating, guys.
So okay, we have a nice spread, and I'm happy. I'm happy to say that most of you will be surprised, and you might learn something today. So that's also useful if you don't know everything already in advance. So the correct, somebody had the correct number. I forgot who it was, but the answer that we have at the moment is about 300. And
wow,
this
so that
photo,
was Kelly.
That was Kelly. Well done, Kelly. Is obviously an unusual answer. It's more than double the amount of young than any other shark has. The next nearest is the blue shark, which is also quite a lot. But obviously it's more common for big animals to have few offspring. And so the whale shark seems to take a different approach, more like a turtle might do, with lots of little offspring, and many of them might not survive the first bit of their life. So it's more of this shotgun approach. So anyway, this photo is from the single pregnant female whale shark that has been investigated by scientists back in the 90s. She was caught in the fishery in Taiwan, and the guys realized that it was unusual, so they called some scientists to have a look at it, and they opened her up and found, I think it was 304 little ones in her uteri, and some of them were still in the egg capsule, and some of them were free already, ready to be born, presumably. And some of them actually survived in an aquarium for a while after that as well. But yeah, so heaps and heaps of little baby whale sharks. And since that discovery in the 90s, we really haven't learned anything about the reproduction of the whale sharks. We thought we were somewhere when we went to the Galapagos there, but then again didn't find them. So this continues to be a mystery, and hopefully we'll crack it eventually, and then I'll give you another presentation on that specifically. The other unusual place you might remember from the map was St. Helena Island in the mid-Atlantic, roughly between Angola or somewhere and Brazil. And over there, you have sharks as well, males and females. And the scientists there have reported some behaviors that look like courtship behavior, like in this photo where the male behind swims and rubs his nose on the female's tail. And a couple of fish actually also reported mating, which no scientist has seen so far, and even just reports are very limited to those 2 people at St. Helena Island. So we know nothing about the whale shark mating so far. But this is the place where you have to go. So it looks like these bigger adult whale sharks are oceanic, and they don't come to those coastal aggregation sites where we normally see whale sharks. They probably most of the time are away from land, and therefore really difficult to find. And those exposed islands, St. Helena and Galapagos, are some of the few places where they swim past the island, and so therefore you can see them there. So we're putting a bit more effort and resources into those places to try to study a different part of the population that we've been missing out on so far. So I think hopefully what I could show you in this section is that just simply taking photos of whale sharks, guessing how long they are, and checking if they're males or females has allowed us to study the species in some reasonably fine. Learned a lot about their segregation and where some of the parts of the population live and how they spend their lives. And much of it is based on just taking a photo. So I hope I can convince you that it's worth it. Go swim with a shark, and if you do, make sure you take a photo from the side as well, not just a pretty photo, so you can be part of whale shark science yourself. It's not just the population structure that we can look at. From these photo IDs, we can obviously track the sharks over time, and we can look at things like growth rate, how fast they might grow. It seems to be quite slow at the moment, although we don't know that much about it yet. And you can also do things like population models. There are in in 1 year, and then you go the next year and see how many of those you've seen again. You can kind of estimate how many of them you might be missing. So these are some of the things that we're working on at the moment. And again, it's just based on simple photo ID that everybody can contribute to. And now at the last section, let's look at some of the conservation issues that whale sharks face. I start off with the rate list assessment that I'm sure you're familiar with, that assesses the species threatened status. And the whale shark is listed as endangered. You can see on the scale there, it's fairly close to the extinct on the right-hand side. So whale sharks are not doing terribly well. This endangered status is mostly because the population has halved over the last 3 generations, so we estimate. The whale sharks before they are lost forever. And there are obviously a few things that we need to look at. So let's have a quick look at some of the threats that whale sharks might face. So you remember whale sharks are born at about 0.5 meter long. They can't swim particularly well, and they're born somewhere out in the open ocean where the adults hang out. So we don't know much about them, but we do know that from the few options that have been made of little baby whale sharks, some of them have actually been found in the stomachs of predators. So the blue shark and the blue marlin both had a little baby whale shark in their stomach. So they probably have a quite high mortality rate when they're small. But once they reach, say, 4, 5, 6 meters long, really big and also very thick skin. It's the thickest skin that we know of. On the back of a large juvenile, it's about 20 centimeters thick. And on the belly of the females that we ultrasounded in the Galapagos, it was more like 30 to 40 centimeters thick. So it's an enormously thick skin that acts like an armor and repels predators, as you can see in this photo from Mozambique, where a toothy shark was trying to have a bite out of the whale shark. You can see some of the indentations on the top and the bottom of both of its halves of its jaw, but it had no chance of biting through it. Predatory sharks have more luck if they go for the fins or the gills, where it's a bit softer and thinner, but probably can't kill a big shark. Well, maybe can, but very rarely. The only thing that we know can take down a big whale shark are killer whales, which have been observed, I think, twice killing whales. That's a possibility. But killer whales don't often live in the same place where whale sharks live, so it's probably not a huge issue. So whale sharks, once they reach a reasonable size, they probably don't have a lot to worry about in terms of natural predators. But another question to you guys: what other threats can you think of that whale sharks might face? And while you do that, I'll show you another video I took in Tanzania. How are we going with the answers there?
Okay, we've got lots of the same answers here. Humans, us, fisheries, bycatch, fishing practices, ocean pollution, ingestion of plastics, reduction in krill abundance, shark nets, irresponsible tourism, fishing their food source, illegal poaching. Covered most of them there. Boat strikes as well.
Wow, amazing. You guys are doing really well. That's pretty much all the points I was going to cover. Oops, sorry again. I'm not really good with this thing.
Another
Sorry
one
about
there
that.
from Logan too, build-up of toxins.
Okay, yeah. So well done, group. And there's probably some of the things you mentioned that I didn't go into details here in the slideshow, but I'll focus on the main ones. And the first one obviously is fishery, direct catching of whale sharks, as these photos suggest. Got from Google, didn't take myself. But whale sharks have been caught in fisheries on purpose in the past. Some of the bigger fisheries were in India and in Taiwan. I think I mentioned the Taiwanese a few times, where whale sharks were targeted because of their meat. Also, the fins are sometimes used for display purposes mostly. I think they're not particularly delicious, but the meat in Taiwan was really highly valuable at some stage. And the fisheries have mostly stopped, in part because they ran out of whale sharks to catch, and also in part because the sharks were protected in those countries. So, for example, in India in the early 2000s, whale sharks were protected, and they look after them quite well. There's some good release practices that some of the NGOs have worked with the fishers to implement. Taiwan as well followed suit and protected whale sharks maybe 13 or so years ago. The only contemporary fishery that exists for whale sharks on purpose is in the South China Sea. We don't know a lot about it for the more recent years, but in the early 2010s, I think there was up to 1,000 whale sharks caught each year in that fishery. And some of the rumors, I think, say that they are not catching as many these days, but we don't have any particularly robust information from there. But by far and large, fisheries, obviously need to be stopped. Like you can't catch an animal that grows really slowly and takes a long time to reach maturity, which we think is somewhere around 30 to 40 years until they can have babies themselves. So that's just a species with a really conservative life history that you can't add extra unnatural mortality very quickly. The other problem you also mentioned is bycatch. The biggest fishery threat in that regard is probably the tuna purse seine and the tuna gill netting that occurs, widespread. And as we saw in the video before, whale sharks often swim with other fish, either they, as in the video there, or they hang out in these ocean fronts out in the open ocean where tuna also hang out, so they can easily get caught in the same net. And of course, the tuna fishers don't want to lose the tuna, so they sometimes try to, if they see that the shark is in the net, they try to release it by putting a rope around its tail and pulling it out, or out of the water or out of the net. Not it's questionable in this particular photo. It's very unlikely because it's out of the water for a long time and they crush themselves basically. They can't be out of the water for long. And even if not, you can sometimes see whale sharks with the tail rope still attached to the tail that would have snapped because it was too heavy maybe for the rope or for the crane, and the shark got away, but the rope stayed attached. And in this particular case, was lucky because we came across it and we managed to cut the rope off. As you can see in the photo, the rope becomes heavier with fouling, there's barnacles and whatnot on it, and it really cuts into the flesh of the shark. And if you don't take it off, it would eventually amputate the tail, and then the shark wouldn't really be able to swim or survive. So this bycatch issue is certainly a large problem for the sharks. And perhaps the best thing we can do is, eat responsible seafood to stop these kinds of net fisheries that exist. You guys mentioned sport strike, and that is an issue for whale sharks mainly because they are not afraid of things, because they are so big and don't have a lot of natural predators to worry about. They don't swim away. If it comes, it can easily hit the shark, and if it's a fast boat, even if the shark wanted to get away, probably couldn't. It's not the most quickest to respond. So whale shark interactions with boats can lead to these propeller cuts, as we see in this photo. I think it's from Mozambique, where it's a fairly small propeller that cut off the dorsal fin. The shark might even survive that, or it's probably quite likely to survive that. Has a low fitness, but it's probably not lethal. If you imagine that with propellers, they can easily cut the shark much more severely and could quite easily kill the shark. So these scars of the survivors kind of help us assess this threat in a sort of indirect way. And we also have a study in progress at the moment where we look at the overlap between the shark's movements and the ships that are going across the ocean to assess that spatial risk. Things like these gill nets here as well can catch whale sharks accidentally and still kill them. So for the shark, it doesn't really matter if it's on purpose or if it's by accident, as if it's a bycatch. But we really need to reduce those mortalities as much as we can. And so some of those questions on threats, most of those really are spatial questions. You want to know where are the sharks most at risk and where do we need to focus our attention on. And so these kinds of questions, these spatial questions, ask for tracking their movements, basically. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I start off with a joke that my daughter told me at dinner time just before. What's the difference between the dog and the marine biologist? Does anybody know? Well, the dog wags a tail and the marine biologist tags a whale. A whale shark in this case, but we do also do that. So we put tags on the fish to see where they go because we can't follow them for a long time. They swim faster than us and they dive down, obviously, when you can't see them. And so this tagging work also involves lots of people. I put some of them on the screen here, Jesse and Fernando and Steve for the tagging study in Tanzania, and Mike, Anthony and David for the satellite tagging study in Mozambique, that I'll show you now. So in Mozambique, we attached satellite trackers to the whale sharks. In those days, is a while ago now, we had this long and floating tag. That means that the shark is at the surface, the tag also is at the surface, and it transmits its position to the satellite, and we can receive that transmission in near real time. I think it's about a 10 or 15 minute delay, and then we know where the shark was pretty accurately. And when we analyze those data, we track a few of the sharks and look where they go. We actually saw that they spent a lot of time in coastal waters, which was a bit of a surprise because there's a big ocean. We kind of thought they would swim away from the coast, but they kind of just went up and down along the coast. In the map, you can see the different colors indicate the different importance of the habitat to them. So red is really important, but even blue is still important. It's not, no color where they're not. So they're not in the deep water, they were really quite in the shallow water. And we combined these data then with aerial surveys where we looked at some of the potential fishing threats that are in the area where the sharks had. And what we found is, well, the same map, but now we overlaid the areas where these gill nets are in use, large mesh gill nets that can easily catch and kill a whale shark. And you can see that they pretty much overlap where the sharks hang out float as well. In specific locations. So there's a few communities that use those nets, not all of them. And so this information then helped us target these particular communities where we needed to have a chat about the fishing methods. And that's exactly what happened. And some of the fishers changed their fishing gear and other things. And some of the fishers became boat drivers and dive guides for the tourist industry. So there's definitely some progress being made over there to reduce that threat of those gill nets in Mozambique. So it's just an example of how you can use these spatial data, combine it with some conservation intervention, and improve the outcome for the sharks. And the second example is from Tanzania, where we used a different kind of technology. We used these acoustic tags that emit a sound frequency that's unique to each tag. If you have listened to the talk last month on shark Fitbits, you know all about that already. So it's the same stuff that they use in pyjama sharks, but we put them outside because we can't catch the whale shark and operate on it. We just put a tag in with a Hawaiian sling. Because the shark's skin's so thick, they don't even notice it. And these are the acoustic receivers that pick up the signals from those tags. And when you take that receiver back up to the shore, to land, and you download the data, you can find out which shark was where at what time. And so we did that off this island in Tanzania. And in the graph, you can see in white with the numbers are all the different stations that we had in the water that picked up the sharks. And in orange is the area that they used the most. And in yellow is the other area around it that was still used quite a bit. And you can see they've got very specific areas. Within a small bay, you can see the scale bar at the bottom 5 kilometers. So it's probably 20 kilometers from the bottom to the top. So in a relatively small area for there are hotspots activity where they hang out a lot. And we tracked those sharks over 5 years. So it's a long time series, and it's really robust sort of information where the sharks hang out a lot. And we even could break it down by month of the year. You can see in the summer here in Australia and in Tanzania in the south, from sort of November to February, the sharks were really close inshore. And then in the year, they were a bit further offshore in the deeper water. So if you come back to the question of which areas are most important to protect, well, we can answer it very clearly here, even with a time added to the answer. So in summertime, you need to protect the area inshore, and in wintertime, it's the area offshore. So if you can install something like a go slow zone for boats where they don't go fast and don't hit the sharks, or give them a chance to get out of the way, or you can reduce the gill nets that are used, make sure they don't get used in those hotspot areas, and you can have a disproportionately large benefit to whale sharks without hampering the efforts of the fishes too much. And so these results only came out this year. We just published it a couple of months ago. So I don't have any management successes yet to tell you about it, but we do have talks underway to hopefully implement some of those recommendations we could make based on those data. Whale sharks are filter feeders, as you probably know. They eat small things like plankton and small fishes. And this photo kind of shows what a plankton sees seconds before its demise. Some of the plankton are reasonably large for plankton. These are suggested shrimps. They are about 1 centimeter long, and it's the favorite food of whale sharks in Tanzania and also in Mexico and one part of the Philippines. And some other places they might eat fish eggs or copepods or other planktonic organisms, maybe some small fishes too. And that brings me, this is how it looks like when there's a really dense patch of suggested shrimps in Tanzania. You can barely see the whale shark because of all the plankton. Unfortunately, the photo of Ellie is not loading, but she has led that work over in Indonesia, and she has sampled the plankton in feeding grounds of whale sharks and also of manta rays, and could calculate some of the dangers that those plastics pose to those filter feeders. In the photo on the left, you can see through the microscope an image of some copepods on the right-hand side, and also some plastic pieces. So they're pretty much the same size. Those microplastics would be indistinguishable in terms of particle size to a whale shark, and you can imagine that they can't avoid that. If they're feeding on plankton and there's something else in the water that's the same size, they probably eat that as well. So that's certainly an issue. I don't have a good photo of a whale shark feeding in a very polluted water, but this manta ray that Ellie sent me is from Indonesia. That is feeding in this really polluted water with lots of plastic pieces in there. With the manta rays, we could actually show that they do eat the plastic, because we also got some poo samples, and we could see that there was plastic in the poo samples. So they do for sure eat microplastics. With the whale sharks, we couldn't show that because we didn't get the poo samples. But eating in waters where there's tons of plastic and lots of microplastics in the water. And we calculated some theoretical ingestion rates for whale sharks, it was 137 pieces of plastic per hour of feeding. And for the mantis, it was a bit less. But there's a lot of plastic that these guys can potentially ingest in those areas. And that's obviously not a good idea, just in terms of mechanically obstructing the gut and the stomach, but also in terms of some of the toxins that are associated with microplastics that might get absorbed into the tissue of the sharks and the mantis. So the easiest thing to fix this obviously is to use less. And there's also clearly some places where it's more of an issue than in other places. In Indonesia, there's it's one of the countries with the most plastics in the water, but it's likely to affect whale sharks elsewhere as well. And lastly, tourism. I think somebody mentioned unsustainable tourism can harm the sharks, and that's certainly the case. Thankfully, most of the tourism on whale sharks is run reasonably well, and the good thing about whale shark tourism is that it puts a dollar value on their lives. And a lot of countries that have protected whale sharks actually had the value from tourism as a specific reason for their protection. So it's been really good for whale sharks to go and swim with them in general. Of course, you should choose a responsible operator that doesn't drive around the sharks at high speed or hits them with a boat. But also you yourself have to be responsible and give the shark a bit of space, like this swimmer here shows nicely. Swim next to the shark and take a photo. Be respectful of the animal you're encountering. In order to improve these things, we have worked with local guides and skippers in lots of different places. Here in Tanzania, another photo from there, where we held a workshop and talked about the code of conduct that we should implement and what are some of the things that the boat drivers can do and the guides can do to improve things. And it's not just because it's good for the whale sharks, it's also good for the tourists. They have a good time when they can see the shark in its doing its normal behavior rather than swimming away scared of the boat or something like that. So once that seekers through, I think it's in everybody's interest to run a sustainable tourism operation. So that's why I think it works quite well in a lot of places. So to wrap it up, I'll just say more about our work that we do. You can look us up online on the Marine Megafauna Foundation.org, as well as all the socials, of course. If you want to get some updates, feel free to check that out. Other than that, go swim with a whale shark if you can. And if you do, make sure you upload some data. I expect some whale shark identification photos from all of you guys. It's really the best way to be involved, and you will help us a ton with it as well. If you want to be more involved, check us out on Patreon. It's under Simon JPS, where we have a small group of enthusiasts that are helping us protect the world's largest fish. Aquafirma runs some trips to some of the places with us that kind of subsidize our travel costs, our fieldwork, and in return, they bring some interested tourists that help us with the research for a week. It's pretty cool for the people. They usually really enjoy it. I always enjoy it. So it's also another thing to keep in mind if you're keen. And if you've seen some of those cool whale shark leggings in some of the photos, and you want some for yourself, get them at Waterlust. It's a company that sponsors our work through the sale of their whale shark apparel. And with that, I thank you all for your attention. I hope it wasn't too long. I rambled on for a bit, but hopefully it wasn't too boring. If you have any questions, I'd be really happy to have a chat with you guys as well now. So let's open the chat, Emily.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Chris. That was awesome. And they are doing some really cool things at Marine Megafauna Foundation. So jump on over to that website, guys, when you get a chance. On topic, Chris, because you've been telling us again and again to go diving with whale sharks, which I'm sure many of us are happy to do just for you and the cause. Sammy is asking if you have any recommendations on where to swim with the whale sharks in the Philippines. She's wanting to avoid avoid certain areas and stick to whale shark friendly zones.
Did you say in the Philippines specifically?
Yes, in the Philippines
okay.
specifically, but anywhere if you have any other recommendations, Chris,
Yeah,
throw them in there.
I mean, in the Philippines, there's a really good operation out of Leyte, which is somewhere in the east. I've been there myself, where the local groups have organized themselves and they look for sharks and tell the tourists to go there. So it's pretty relaxed, and there's certainly none of that feeding going on that you might refer to from Oslo. So that obviously I would not recommend. But in other places where, you know, you might look it up online if there's sort of mention in the tour brochures, or that's usually a good sign. Or if they work with scientists over in the Philippines, there's a good organization called La Mavi that works in whale shark science. So if they're involved in those tours, then, you know, obviously go for it. There is another site I haven't personally been up in Don Sol, but I hear it's quite well run up there as well. And a new site in Palawan. If you get out to the Tupataha reefs, it's well worth it. Just for the diving is fantastic. I've been there a couple of times, and there are some whale sharks there, but there's not a ton of them, perhaps. But you might see some. But otherwise, in Palawan, in Puerto Princesa, there's a new aggregation that was only recently found, and I personally haven't been yet, but also sounds like a good place to go.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if you didn't have your pens out, guys, we are recording, so you can jump on YouTube later and grab those off Chris again. We're having a few connection issues, Chris. I just want to check with you if you're happy for some people to connect with you, or if you want them to connect through us on Reef Check, and we can pass some questions through if anyone feels like they missed anything.
I mean, they can. Obviously, I'm open for questions. I don't have to go to sleep yet. Oh, you mean later on? You can email me as well.
Later on, just in case. Yeah, perfect. Okay, just so you know, guys. Otherwise, just email through to Reef Check and we can pass those questions on to Chris as well. We do have a few more from tonight. I'm about to butcher this, Lee, but Lee said she used to work in Mikumi National Park, Tanzania, and she wants to know if you're collecting research from Mafia. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Mafia Island is where we have been working on since 2012. I'm actually supposed to be there right now, but obviously because of travel restrictions and all that, I'm missing it out. I'm missing this year. I really like Mafia Island a lot. It's a fantastic place, super relaxed, wonderful island, lots of lovely people, and really cool sharks as well. They're unusually resident in Mafia Island. The sharks hang out there year after year, and even throughout the year. They don't seem to go anywhere there because it's such a cool place. They just want to stay there. So every time I go back, it's kind of like seeing old friends. Some of the sharks we've seen, 50 times. So it's a really cool place. If you ever go back, whoever asked the question, if you go back to Tanzania, make sure you stop by in Mafia.
Brilliant. That's awesome. We've got one from Shai who said that he'd like to know if it's hard to get an accurate ultrasound through 40 centimeters of skin.
Yeah, that is a big problem, and we used obviously a specialized underwater ultrasound in a little suitcase. It was like 20 kilos. That's why the guy had a jetpack that was operating it, because it was really hard to swim with it. So yeah, a specialized machine, but even that one was struggling to get through the thick skin of some of the big sharks. So if you have any contacts to someone who makes even stronger ultrasounds, let us know. But we did see in some of the images, we did see some follicles on the ovary. So we knew that we could see something. So if there was baby whale sharks in there, we probably would have seen them.
There you go. Simone and Lauren, just on that, clarifying that the 304 whale shark babies was from one birthing event.
It was not from a birthing event. It was still in the mom that was killed, so she was dead, and that's why they could find out how many were in there. It looked like they were in 3 different stages of development, with one group that was out of the egg already and ready to swim, and another group that was a bit behind, and another group that was even still further behind. So we're not sure if 300 are being born at once. Maybe Is it the same with turtles as well, where like they lay one clutch of eggs and then at the end of the season they do another? Could be something like that. But really, this is just speculation. We really know very little about their reproduction for now, for sure.
Wow. And is it true that they're 1/2 meter long?
Yeah, so that 1/2 meter, I think, comes from the Philippines, from that one photo that I showed you, that one individual that was caught that was very small. I think some of the other ones that were from that caught shark in the fishery were a bit larger. So they might be born at maybe 60 or 64 centimeters, I think it was, or maybe even a little bit bigger. But that's, that's just from the one that we know. So imagine if you look at humans and you take one and then you say, well, all babies are born at 30 centimeters or whatever it is. It's not like that. So there's likely to be a span, and we don't know the exact number or or even an average. We just don't know, because we just have the one shark to go by. But yeah, somewhere around 1/2 meter long.
Wow, it just goes to show how truly big they are then. Giving you an idea there, guys. Marie wants to know if they visit the east coast of Australia in our backyard.
Yes, occasionally you get reports on the news and of Australia where a whale shark swims past. But there's a new site up north where somebody went. Adam Barnett was leading it from JCU or associated with. But I don't know all that much about it. It's north of North Queensland. I forgot the name where it is, but far up north, and we don't know much about it yet. But there apparently are some whale sharks up there, and I think in December Adam's going back there, so maybe we'll find out more about that soon. So keep your ears peeled on that.
Awesome. Okay. Another question from Marie. You spoke about some threats to whale sharks, and she's wanting to know if there's any predation events from great white sharks, particularly during their adolescence.
Well, not that we know of. In Mozambique we have lots of big predatory sharks. You've got tigers and whites and bull sharks and all that. And we did see, a fair amount of, well, not a lot, but we did see some bite marks like the one I showed you. But I don't think a great white can bite through the whale shark skin. Maybe, if they're smaller, sure, but once they are sort of 5 meters long, probably not. They might be able to take off a fin or something that we have seen with where you have a characteristic sort of semicircular bit missing, where quite likely a shark would have bitten that off. There was one in the Galapagos actually that we saw that had a good chunk out of the side, but it's hard to tell, what made that bite. In that case, either it could have been a bite when it was smaller and then it just grew and now it looks like it was a huge bite, or it was actually like an orca or something, a killer whale that might have taken a bite out of it. It's hard to know.
Wow, big battle
but
scars.
I mean, predatory events have really not been very rarely only. You'd have to be quite lucky to see it.
Who knows? Maybe one will pop up soon, Chris. Next year, after this year.
Yeah.
Renee's asking, does warming oceans affect their distribution? Nice question, Renee.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I didn't touch on that at all, mostly because there's so little we know about them, even just like, their preferences. They live in tropical and subtropical waters. And I think for the most part, at least for the juveniles, the thing they're most interested in is food, and plankton obviously responds fairly quickly to changing climate. So you would imagine it does affect them via the food, most likely. They don't perhaps get pushed towards the poles or things like other animals that have a very narrow temperature range. But yes, the food gets affected by the changing climate. It'll probably at this stage mean a change in distribution. So some of the places we have seen fewer and fewer whale sharks over the years, and we're not sure if they're all dead or if they just swam somewhere else where there's better feeding now that the climate has changed. So there's lots. Again, we don't know about it.
Okay. And do you find that the food source correlates with the larger whale shark aggregations?
Well, many of the whale shark aggregations are in a place where you have a burst of productivity. It might be a fish spawning and then the sharks come and eat all the fish eggs. Or it might be, some other plankton aggregation.
Right.
Whale sharks live in the tropics and the subtropics where traditionally there's not a ton of plankton. If you want to eat plankton, the best place to be is at the poles. That's why a lot of the whales go to the poles to feed and then come to the warmer waters to give birth because it's better for the babies. But the good food is more in the higher latitudes. So for a plankton feeder that is so big, it's being a tropical fish is not a great idea. It would be better if they could handle the cold temperature very longer, such as the basking shark does, right? It's also a plankton feeder, and they live in the higher latitudes where plankton is much bigger. And so that's, a different approach, perhaps a bit more reasonable. I don't know. But because the whale sharks are in the tropics, they really need to find these dense patches of food, which might be found few between, and they might have times where they don't find any food and go hungry for a while.
Right. Okay. We've got another question from Nick. He's interested in your data specifically and what you're using it for, and he wants to know if governments are interested or if it's more local communities and private organizations and foundations. Well,
in order to achieve conservation change, you'd have to include all of the stakeholders, which includes the government. In some places, the government might come to you, but I think most of the time it's the other way around. Also, mostly because a lot of the whale shark aggregations are in relatively poor countries, developing nations that perhaps don't have a focus on animal conservation, particularly in the ocean where it's so difficult to see anything. So you kind of have to highlight that their plight and also the value, which is why I mentioned how important whale shark tourism is. Some of the places we've worked in, even the local government just didn't even know that whale sharks were there. And then once you can show us how the tourists come here and spend all this money to see the shark, then they are interested in it, and then you have a chance to make some changes. But yeah, we don't have any. I don't think we ever had. Might be wrong, but I don't think we've ever had any government grants. It's not like they are interested in it in the first place. It's more like us doing the work and then sharing it, so we can achieve some conservation outcomes.
Awesome, and doing great stuff, guys, too. Shai is asking, do we know if whale sharks become herbivorous before growing so big or after? Good question, Shai.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the herbivory has been lingering around a little bit in the scientific literature as well. I thought I put it to bed once in a 2013 paper, but apparently not. Do whale sharks ingest floating algae sometimes? Absolutely. I've looked at some stomach contents of some sharks that died naturally on the beach. They misjudged the tide, and we could have a look into it, and there was some algal fragments in there. But is it their food source? Probably not, because there's lots of floating algae around, even in places where we see them. They could easily go and eat these floating algae, but they don't. They eat the plankton instead. So I'm not sure. Even if they were to eat it, I guess you'd have to see if it was physiologically possible for them to digest it and to get any nutrition from it. There was a shark, I think it was the bonnet head, that was recently shown that it can use plant material for its nutrition, but so that was kind of a spectacular find. If whale sharks can do it too, it will also be a fairly spectacular find. I think for now I would lean towards that they don't eat vegetables.
Okay, so we need to direct Shai back to that 2013 paper then.
It's a long time ago now, that science has moved on. So some other people have touched on it recently in 2019. I think there was a study in Japan where they also looked at some of the biochemistry, the biochemical makeup, and also didn't find evidence for it. But it's possible
Cool.
that we don't know for sure to say no or yes.
Of course. Little we do know. Logan is asking if you have any tips for an 8-year-old who wants to be a marine biologist, just like you.
Great question, and excellent to hear, Logan, that you're excited about marine biology. I think the best thing you can do is, do what you do at the moment, learn things from wherever you can. Go and help out if you are in the Sunshine Coast. You can help with the Reef Check team and get involved on the ground and in the field. If you are when you are a little bit older, it might get a bit easier to do some volunteering as well, and that's really the key. That's what I tell everybody who is at university as well. Is the best thing to do is to volunteer your time in different labs, find out what you're interested in, and then just follow that and go for it. And once you have a foot in the door, and other doors will open for you. So you just have to put in the effort at the start and don't be shy to try things. And if it doesn't work out, try something else.
Awesome advice, Chris. And that doesn't, like you said, doesn't just go for the 8-year-olds out there. That's for everyone. And Reef Check will take any help.
Yeah.
So feel free to message us, guys. And I've got another question from Nick, which we might wrap up with this one for you, Chris, so we don't hold you for too long. But Nick's asking, is there a particular location where the whale sharks will die? Do the deceased bodies fall to the ocean floor like whales, or are they closer to the reefs and shorelines? Tricky one.
I'm sorry, I think I missed it. Is there a specific place where they die? Is that the question?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And do their bodies fall to the ocean floor like
Yeah.
other whales? Or
Okay,
close to
good.
the reefs?
Yeah, so that's good. I actually was meant to mention that during the talk when we looked at the boat, with the boats hitting the sharks. So when they die, they sink because they're negatively buoyant. They have to swim actively to stay at a certain level. So it's not like whales or dolphins. And that's why we very rarely see dead whale sharks, right? Because they sink. The only few ones that we do see are very, very few. And they sort of beach, not really beach themselves, but kind of swim in the shallow waters, and then the tide goes out and they get trapped. Or maybe a big wave or something confuses them, and then you see them on the beach. But otherwise, yeah, I think many of them die out in wherever they swim in the open ocean, and they sink to the seafloor. So in terms of ecological implications, whale sharks have a role to play, perhaps similar to the whales when they sink and create these whale falls where lots of other animals depend on that. And whale sharks probably do that too. But I think there's only one that has been seen once by a submarine somewhere in Gabon, I think it was. Not 100% sure. Yeah, so we don't know. I don't think there's a specific place where they go to die like elephants, but when they die, they sink, and we don't know anything about that. I don't think, apart from that one from a submarine, I don't know of any other that we know of.
There you go. Okay. Well, there is some awesome feedback in that chat group, Chris. So I'll definitely pass all of that on to you after tonight so you can have a read, and everyone's loving the chat. I'll pass you over to Renee now so she can finish up if there's anything left.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks everybody for listening in and for all the amazing questions. Really cool stuff. You guys are a great group. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Chris, and thanks, Em, for juggling all those questions. They were coming from everywhere, so I think you did a good job to stay on top of them. We'll maybe Shy before you. Oh, I don't know if Shy's there. One of us. Oh yeah, cool. Just save the chat log so Chris can have a read before we close it down.
That's good.
But yeah, other than that, Chris, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up? No.
So good.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chris.
So thank you everyone for joining, our dedicated audience, and Chris, thank you so much for sharing that. We had so much engagement with that tonight. Once we got through our first little technical issues, we got there in the end. So everyone's saying thank you in the chat, and it was wonderful and interesting. So we'll be back next year with our coastal corals in February. If there's any topics or ideas or speakers you want to hear from, let us know. We'll be compiling. We'll have a brainstorming session soon to start our schedule. if anyone's watching this as a recording, thank you for joining. We accidentally kicked someone out because we thought they were a robot, but they weren't, and we couldn't let them back in. So we're really sorry about that. So I was trying to message her, but it wasn't working. So hopefully a few people find it on YouTube who were unable to join the event or stay on the event. But yeah, other than that, hope everyone has a safe and happy Christmas, holidays, summer, storm season. We've got a strong El Nino, so get ready for lots of rain and storms. And yeah, have a good night. Thank you so much again, Chris.
Thanks, guys.